Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Cheryl Wills. Thank you for joining us today for Let's Talk Politics. I hope you're enjoying today's event. I'm really proud. 1989, and I specialized in broadcast journalism. I'm an author of a series of books about my great 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 grandfather, Sandy Wills, who served in President Lincoln's Union Army during the Civil War. And I'm currently a senior anchor with New York One News, based in New York City. Been there a long time. Before I introduce our remarkable panelists to all of you, a few housekeeping items that we want to establish. We'll have a Q&A portion toward the end of this program. So feel free to submit any questions you have for our panelists in the Q&A module at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we'll get to as many as possible. And you know we have a lot to talk about, right? So we're going to try to answer all of your questions. Now, as we are all aware, this program is part of the first ever virtual CBT. And while, yes, we are sad that we cannot be together in person and hug each other in person and reminisce in person like we did a few years back, you know what? This is the next best thing. Our goal for CBT is still the same: to uplift students of color at Syracuse University. We are also here to connect with each other and engage in virtual sessions throughout the day. But most importantly, like I said, to support the Our Time Has Come Scholarship Program. It is so important that we reach back and help students. I know I spent a lot of time in the financial aid office, and I don't know where the aid came from, but it came. And now we want to make sure that students have a chance to graduate from our amazing alma mater. At any time during this program, please see the link in the chat to donate directly to the Our Time Has Come Scholarship Fund and help support current and future students on their educational journey. Truly, it's the gift that really keeps on giving. Now, on to the good stuff. I have to say, in my 31 years, I believe it's been 31 years since graduation, never in a million years did I think I would ever see a Black president, Barack Obama, and never, ever, ever did I think we would be living through a pandemic and the toxic election cycle that's currently playing out. It's like we're in the twilight zone a little bit. Now, we're not going to play politics. We're going to, if no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, we respect you, but it cannot be denied that this is a departure from the norm. We are 18 days from the presidential election. We know millions of our fellow Americans have already voted. And no matter what side, again, the political spectrum you're on, we can all agree on this. This election will be one for the books. Now, we have an incredible panel of Black Girl Magic. I'm so excited about this Black Girl Magic right now that I could barely sleep last night. And we are going to keep it 150 and talk politics. Let me begin with the fabulous Angela Robinson. So many of you may remember her, fellow Newhouse alum, many awards and accomplishments. And on a personal note, when I was in Newhouse, I looked up to her and her stellar career. She was my inspiration. So I have to kind of pinch myself now that I'm leading a conversation with the great Angela Robinson. From Syracuse University alone, she has been awarded the Chancellor's Citation Award, the Orange Circle Award. In 2014, she was awarded the George Arentz Award from Syracuse University. Now, by the way, that award is the university's highest honor. It's only given to SU alumni who have really excelled in their chosen fields. She is an Atlanta native, veteran and award-winning broadcast journalist, And she is, can I just ad lib for a second? She is the bomb.com. I'm so glad she's here. And she is currently the Director of Operations for the National Association of Black Journalists. And prior to this, she served as host and executive producer of the award-winning news and public affairs show In Contact. All right. And I hope Yamiche is with us. Did she join us? Yay, Yamiche is here. I'm so thrilled that Yamiche is here. She is so busy. She is the White House correspondent for PBS NewsHour. She is making me proud every day, and I'm sure so many of you. She's a contributor for NBC News and MSNBC. She often tells the stories, and she tells them with tremendous integrity about the intersection of race and politics. So who better to be with us today? As a contributor for NBC and MSNBC, she frequently appears on Morning Joe, Andrea Mitchell Reports, and Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. She speaks truth to power, even when it can be difficult to do so. And for me, that's what a journalist should be. I'm so proud of her. Previously, Alcindor worked as a national political reporter for the New York Times, where she covered the presidential campaigns of Mr. Trump and Senator Bernie Sanders, as well as Congress. She also wrote about the impact of Trump's policies on working class people and people of color. And this year, the White House Correspondents Association named her the recipient of the Aldo Beckman Award for overall excellence in White House coverage. Bravo, bravo. She's also been honored with the Gwen Ifill Next Generation Award by Simmons University and Next Gen Leader Award by Georgetown Entertainment and Media Alliance. I can go on and on about the achievements about these incredible women, but I cannot wait to kick off this conversation. And without any further ado, please welcome Angela Robinson and Yamiche Alcindor. Ladies, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, wonderful. So let's start with the beginning. I want to start with you, Angela. Let's talk about the obvious. There is a sister. I can say that, right? This is CBT. We can keep it, sisterly, right? There is a sister running for vice president. He is breaking down barriers every single day. What are your personal observations about Kamala Harris, Senator Kamala Harris? And what do you think her chances are in this political environment that we're all watching?
First of all, good morning. Thank you so much. And I just have to say, because we all are sisters in the fold here, it is a thrill for me to be with these powerful Black women journalists. No, they are the bomb.com. They have a tendency to make me 110 years old. Not quite that old yet, but I am so grateful for what they are doing and will continue to do. And as we all try to open up doors. And I have to, because we have to thank those that make it happen and come before. I have to thank the multicultural department, Rachel and Miko, got to do that shout out. And also, in case people don't know, behind the scenes, all this historic virtualness, 3 women are running this thing, keeping us up. So we have to thank Kelsey and Lindsay and Emily. Just wanted to give that shout out. I'm old enough to do that, didn't mean to disrupt. But yes, Senator Kamala Harris. Well, first of all, on a personal level, you are filled with pride that this opportunity is happening. She's on the ticket that some hope will get in, period. And then she sits at the door of the presidency. And won't that be a notion in America? We thought we went through a notion with Barack Hussein Obama, but won't that be something? I think she's brilliant. I think she revolutionized a lot of things coming from the state of California. I think she brings great measure and merit to what is going on in this world that we need to look at, not just in this election cycle, but all that we are trying to deal with as we are all confined and, within our own places and spaces, just trying to make a way and connect. Bottom line is she's a sister. And she went to Howard, and she's an AKA for all the AKAs out there. So she is entrenched in who she is and whose she is. And that is exceptional. Particularly, I feel, in this moment in time that we are in. It is beyond, it's not even just fair to say, sisters, it is reality based that this is a very strange atmosphere. This is an extremely, that's an understatement. I think if the ticket goes, of course, so she goes. And then we go from there. A lot of people are asking about the debate, and maybe you'll come to that later. But in looking at that, just sitting through that debate, was that not the most, do I need to hurry up and take off my earrings kind of moment in time? Reality that was going on there. I think she's quite the human. She's quite the politician. She, like I said, she knows who she is and who she is. And I think she has great compassion for what needs to happen in this here America.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. And Yamiche, thanks for joining us. We know how busy you are covering all things Washington, all things politics, but we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. So to build on what Angela said, Yamiche, what's your impression of Senator Harris, and how do you rate her debate performance, as Angela referenced, against the vice president?
Well, first, I wanted to say thank you so much for having me here. I feel so excited to be along in this event with Angela and yourself. It's a great honor to be here. Yes, things are crazy, and I'm coming to you from Florida. I was rushing, but I was like, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it.
Yeah. So you yet to miss a live shot, you mean?
As I'm juggling all of this. But for me, so I read, and I think I just also have to acknowledge, because I feel this in my spirit, 2020 has been so tough. Yeah. It's been so difficult. So for the people who are watching this, for the people who are taking their time out, there's so much space in your life and so many hours in the day, and that you're giving us this hour means something to me. It means something that you're spending this time with us, because I know, myself included, there's been grief and mourning and all sorts of stuff that I've been juggling. So I just want to say thank you for making this time to be with us. So Senator Harris versus Mike Pence, of course, it was less combative, right? The first debate, we knew it was going to be wild, but it was out this world, right? There were just so many moments where I was like, oh.
I know.
Because it was just combative from the very beginning. I had never seen a debate moderator scream before. He literally screamed. Chris Wallace at one point said, "Gentlemen, essentially shut up." And there was also, everyone was gearing up for President Trump to be combative, as he was. He was interrupting and all the things that he does. But then Joe Biden was calling him a liar and a clown. It was one of those moments where Democrats that I talked to said, yeah, that's what we want. We want somebody who's going to be fierce and match that. And I think that was a little bit of different energy than we've heard from like a Michelle Obama, who said, let's all stay high, even if they go low. And I would say that Joe Biden went a little low in that
yes,
debate. So I think that was interesting. In terms of Senator Harris, I think that she was doing her best to remain calm, to present facts while also not appearing as though she was out of control. She couldn't do a lot of this stuff. She couldn't call Vice President Pence a clown for all sorts of reasons. And I think for a lot of Black women that I've interviewed, they recognized in Senator Harris the looks that she was giving, the pause that she was giving, the politeness and saying, "Sir, I'm speaking." She was in some ways channeling what a lot of Black women face, no matter your political leanings, when you're in a professional setting and people are trying to interrupt you and not allow you to say your point. I will say that Vice President Pence also explained and showed that he's a smoother deliverer of the Trump agenda, that he is someone who will present facts that at times are misleading, at times just plain out lies, but he will do it in a way that is different than President Trump, that still gets at the same message. So I think you saw in him what Republicans like and what Republicans see, and why Republicans see him as possibly a 2024 contender, because he can say some of the same things and sell the Republican agenda in a way that President Trump, in his brashness, might not be as good as doing in a smoother way.
Yamiche,
Cheryl, I'm sorry.
Yeah, allow me to ask. I want to build on this while Yamiche brought up these points. Yamiche, I want to roll back the clock a little to the summer when you were at the White House doing your job with high integrity, as you always
Mm,
do. And the president looked at you in a way that set Black Twitter on fire. And he responded to you in a way that personally hurt my feelings. And I just want to know, how did you feel about the president's snap response to you? And how did you keep your composure with the president of the United States? And you handled it with tremendous class, sis. Okay? I was
Thank
proud of
you.
you. I was proud of you.
yes,
But the
yes,
sister
yes.
in me jumped up from my chair for you.
Say
Okay?
that.
So tell me, Yamiche, what went through your mind when the president addressed you and almost dismissively, and just take us inside your head during that moment that so many African Americans who saw that really winced.
Well, I want to answer this question in two ways. The first is that I really, really try hard to be prepared when I go into the White House. I research, I say my questions out loud, I think about what the president might say that might be misleading, and try to think of what are the fact checks that I might have to do in real time. I was a print reporter for a long time, so my voice and my body was not part of how I was doing my job. It was all about writing. So for me, I'm still getting comfortable in the communication of journalism in a way that is, of course, TV journalism. So there's that part that's the when the president's calling me nasty or saying things, I have to keep thinking to myself, well, I'm poised. I'm a TV journalist now. People expect me to have my stuff together. They expect a polished delivery, and I have to give them that.
Yeah.
So I think that, and also I think American people deserve a
Yes.
press that represents them in a way that shows that we are there to answer questions, not to be sideshows, not to get into arguments. Because I know so many millions of Americans have lost their jobs, have buried the people that they loved, have had the Zoom call with their mother for their last moments in their lives. So when you think about it in that grand way, I
Yeah.
think I need to make sure that that all of those people watch me and say, I need her to answer, to get the questions to the
Right.
kitchen table issues, to the
Yeah.
issues that I'm thinking
Right.
of for my family, for our very survival. So I
Right.
think that that's the professional part of it. And then I also think, as a Black woman, I think that a lot of Black women have been in situations, maybe other people, I will agree, but especially African American women, because that's my experience. You've been told something about yourself that you knew wasn't true. Someone told you were angry. Someone told you didn't smile enough in the meeting. Someone told you were being combative or hostile or whatever it is. And you stood your ground and you smiled and you kept your job that day and you figured out how to move on. So I really feel like my ancestors, and my mother, my Black mother who raised me alone, my Haitian immigrants, they have, I think, instilled in me a feeling of stand up for yourself, do it in a way that is classy, but do it in a way that people come away understanding that you're not there to play games and that you are very professional. So I really do think that everybody has a moment in your life, or several moments in your life, where you've had to stand up for yourself while also having to have people tell you something that you knew not to be true about yourself. And I think that for me, it's happened, of course, with millions of people watching, but it's probably happened to you in a boardroom or somewhere else, and you've had to just stand your ground while also remaining professional and also walking away having accomplished what you came to accomplish to do.
Exactly.
Because for me, journalism is a mission. It's not just a job that I took because it was a job. I think of Emmett Till. I think of civil rights journalism. I think of so many things when I walk in the White House. So for me, I'm not going to be moved off my mission, which is to make sure that people have a voice in this White House.
Beautifully said. Don't let anybody make you lose your composure. I've never been prouder. Thank you for who you are. Let's move on to voter suppression. Angela, as we speak, there are Americans, especially in Black and Brown communities, who are standing online for hours. In some cases, I think yesterday, 12 hours. Even President Obama responded to that on Twitter. How did we get here? Angela,
Well,
especially you being the veteran journalist, you've been through many elections, of course, election cycles. How did we get here where Americans are standing online for 12 hours?
well, I think there are a possible lot of different answers to that. Let me speak directly to that as a veteran journalist, but someone who is a child of the South.
Yeah.
A sister of the South, a very proud native of ATL, of Atlanta. When we've been going through this, as in a lot of different regions and other Black communities across the nation since time. Recently, when Stacey Abrams ran for governor, and we had the same man who was in the office that could control the ballots and the voting running for governor and didn't want to step down and so on and so forth. It is deliberate. From where I sit, we have now hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of voters have already voted in Atlanta. I think we need to really be clear. We're in an election now. November 3rd is the last day, but we are in an election now with, what is it, Yamiche, 11, 12 million folks now possibly voted. And so I believe it is deliberate as it was, and as we talk about history and ancestors and Emmett Till and all that everyone can really see, we bring to it the love and the passion, the mission, as Yamiche said, of this, what we do is, umpteen years ago, you had to count jelly beans in a jar. Then you had to do something else ridiculous. And now in the Atlanta area, in the Georgia area, and other southern states, you had to have this ID, but you couldn't have that picture ID. And you're not going to open up, even entertain the notion of, can we change the day of voting? It took everything we had just to have early voting. And so now you have polling stations, a lot of them in the African-American community, as I've been watching from a DMV space to my hometown, that have 30 machines, 10 are working, 5 people. And you have a fazillion and 1 people in line. But here's the good news when it comes to Black and brown. Here's the good news. We're going to stand in line until we can't stand anymore. We are going to vote. So all of the tactics that are going to be used and will be used, and how we got here, the object of the game is to get out of it. Is to get folks in place who will not, you see what I'm saying? Yes. To equate a brother who has a social justice institute in Chicago, excuse me, I can't think of his name right now. He said, sometimes we are so worried about the giving back and the giving. Why don't we start with, what did you take away? Let's start there. Oh, you see what I'm saying? So the object of the game, as long as they continue to do these kinds of things, say the mail-in ballot won't work. The people have been mailing in ballots since Civil War. Time. So we must continue to fight that. But the object of the game, I think, is to rid of it. And one way, you must use all of your God-given everything to get out and vote, period. We will stand in the line. People were saying with so long lines with Obama, you all remember? Sisters, you remember that? I know everybody remembers it. And, we are at that point again, that we will have to stand until you cannot literally stand anymore. If you can't stand, you crawl. But you get up in there and you vote. And then you can then help to ease and end the suppression. We are constantly fighting some kind of suppression and oppression. But God built us to last, period.
Yes, indeed.
So that's just that. And that's how we fight that. Let's end it, get it out.
Yeah. Yamiche, talk to us about how you see, from your vantage point, with boots on the ground as a national journalist, voter suppression playing itself out.
I think 2 things. I think that we see the actual implementation of voter suppression. So just this year, you look at polling places that were closed. You look at early voting sites that were closed. I remember in 2016, I had wheeled myself to the Jay-Z and Beyonce concert that Hillary Clinton won. I covered Bernie. But as soon as Hillary said she was having a concert with Beyonce, I just emailed all the editors at the New York Times and said, hey, I'm going there. I don't know what I'm gonna cover, but I know where I'm going. And luckily for me, they were like, fine, this has nothing to do with your beat, but go ahead. And I remember talking to people there, and I was asking them, are you going to vote? Are you going to vote? And someone said to me, well, yeah, but we used to have 6 polling places, and now we only have 1. And there used to be 6 early voting places, and now there's 1. So it's going to be a lot harder this year. And it dawned on me then, we are asking questions of who you're going to vote for, but it's really how are you going to vote, and can you vote, and can you make the time to vote? Because there are so many people who don't have 12 hours on a Tuesday to stand in line. And it's really, I think, tough. So I think we're seeing continuously the areas where we're seeing voting, the methods of voting be eroded. And I will say, I think it's objectively true that Republicans are the ones who have done this more often than Democrats, especially when you look at the case in North Carolina. I think everyone remembers when the judge said that Republicans targeted Black voters with surgical precision because they understood where Black people were voting, and they wanted those particular voters to have an issue with voting. I also see this thing that the Biden campaign is doing, which is they're making the case that there needs to be a blowout. They are saying we need to have everybody vote. We need to have all the enthusiasm, because if we have a blowout, then President Trump won't be able to argue. I don't know if that's true, but what I do know is that is starting to sink into voter psyches. So I'm here in Florida, and I can tell you that a lot of the Biden people that I talk to, Biden supporters, they say, well, we have to make sure we get as many people to vote. I have to take my cousin, I have to do this. We're packing snacks, we're doing what we have to, because we can't just have the cousin who stayed home in 2016 who said, well, Hillary Clinton's probably going to win. Why do I need to take off work to go vote? That person needs to be dragged along with grandma and everyone else into the van to go vote. So I think there really is this real, there's this real fear that is driving people, I think, in high numbers to the polls. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I think at the end of the day, one of the biggest unknowns is how will President Trump react to all of this? Right. He said that if he doesn't win, that the vote is rigged. That he doesn't believe that he can lose with there being a free and fair election. Yesterday, he said, I absolutely want a peaceful transfer of power. But before that, he had been declining to commit to a peaceful transfer of power. So I think it's also going to be really interesting to see what levers the president uses as the head of the federal government to try to possibly suppress the vote.
Yeah. So
tomorrow it could be something different. He could say something different this afternoon.
Right.
It could be a whole brand new ball game. And I think it also speaks to, as you try to eliminate the suppression and exercise, as you say, Yamiche and Cheryl, how you vote.
Right.
You've got to also, once you get in there, this presidential election is very important, but in every election, you got to vote down ballot, because the way you empower the local, your space and your community and your place can help to dictate what measures of so many things can be put into place. It's just like you got to take the census, because it's about the counting. Yeah. And so I also caution in the urgency of getting the cousin and everybody else who didn't, or to make sure you're there and you have a plan, as the slogan goes now, is it just you gotta make sure that even though you start at the top, you gotta read those amendments. You gotta vote for them. You gotta vote down ballot, up ballot. You gotta vote the entire ballot, and you've got to vote in your local places and spaces.
Right. And Angela, to build on what you're saying, Angela, let's talk about the power of the Black woman vote. There's been a lot of talk about that this election cycle. Why do you think they're just discovering the power of the Black woman vote, as if we hadn't been voting for generations?
Really, the most progressive group of voters, the voters that delivered key states for Barack Obama. Right. The voter that will get the Black voter woman who will get the community out to vote, because we got to worry about the health care, the child care, my care, your care, and everything else. I do not know why people are so amazed. I do not know why, as I often say, why are we so amazed that racism exists? Why are people so, I can't believe that happened. I don't understand that. So, I mean, yes, there is power in that. Yamiche probably has recent numbers of what it's looking like now as we progress in voting, but yes, the power is there. Yes, we need to go in droves. We're the ones that will galvanize. Why folks are alarmed when the numbers and the stats and the maps all show is is, I think, partly unbelievable and partly perhaps a tactic of the other side to convince those and to suppress the possibility that you will actually get up and vote. Black women will come and jack you to the polls and any place else you need to be. I think without question this year, because of Senator Harris and because of where she stands and who she is and what she's been through, they don't think we'll be there. I think everybody needs to just back up. Just wait. Yeah.
Yamiche, what makes the power of the Black woman vote different now than, say, like Angela said, during the Obama era?
I'm not sure if the power is different. I think that President Trump is doing some interesting things because he's winning higher numbers and overperforming with Black men and with Latino men. And I think that that makes the Black women a more critical idea because Barack Obama had higher numbers with Black men and I think also with Latino men. So I think in President Trump, there are some segments of the African-American male community and Latino male community that like the bravado, the brashness, the language, the some people say the misogyny. The president would say the strong hand that he has. So I think that has shined a brighter light on Black women because Black women are so loyal to the Democratic Party. And by the way, something that Nicole Hannah-Jones, my good friend at the New York Times, often reminds me of, Black women are usually the people who vote the most in the country, period. Compare Black women to any other group, Black women are still voting in the highest number. So I think apart from the race and age and all that stuff, Black women have showed up for the democracy and have put in the work for this democracy over and over again and outperformed other groups when it comes to just voting by numbers in general. So I think that's probably why we're thinking about this. One thing that I think is really interesting, and I can't quite get at this, is Senator Harris, when she was running herself, she obviously didn't win the nomination, but Black women are so excited about her now. I think Black women were more excited about her as VP than as president. I don't know what that's about. Yeah. I don't know why that happened to her and why. I mean, there are all these think pieces about how her campaign was run and the money that they spent and all sorts of things. But I was really taken aback by how excited Black women got once she was the VP pick. And I wonder if she also wonders about how she could have harnessed that power and that excitement to get the top job.
Do you think maybe there was just some honest missteps in that campaign? I know that first debate, there was a lot of questions when she was running for president. I think maybe there was still a lot of, this will never happen in America, not now. So there's no way I'm going to be there. I don't know. I think it was a multitude of things and perhaps the exhaustion of everything right now, knowing that you must make a difference. Oh, you must usher in this ticket might be galvanizing more than ever. And I hear you, Yamiche. It was very interesting because we were all saying she didn't take California. Yeah. So you were like, oh no, I don't know if that's going to be the right fit and whatnot. But I think now we're at such our complete wits end. She's got the support. The Biden-Harris ticket indeed will have the black.
I think that just based on my reporting, there are two things that you were touching on, Angela, that to me make sense. One is people were scared. Especially South, like I was in South Carolina right before the primary, and Southern, especially people that are, and Angela, you know this, I grew up in Miami, so it's not really the South because I consider it almost the Caribbean. But there were Southern Black people that were like, look, we need somebody that white people will feel comfortable with at the top of the ticket. And they were voting with thinking about their white neighbors. And that's, I think, a lot of why Joe Biden was able, he also, of course, was the VP to the first Black president. So he had a little bit of the Obama shine on him going into it. I also think that a lot of people didn't know who Senator Harris was. Obviously, she's been a rock star in DC for a couple of years. But when I went to South Carolina and I was asking people, well, what do you think about Senator Harris? I was expecting them to talk about criminal justice, talk about the fact that she was a prosecutor. And people were saying, who is that? Who is that? Right. Kamala who? Right. And it was like, oh, so outside of DC, people really don't even know who she is. So I think that there was also the name recognition thing that impacted her. And I think it'll be interesting to see, of course, in 2024, which is a long way away, but how that works out for her now that more people know her name.
Yeah, it
So
will
true,
be
in that
interesting.
synergy too, Cheryl, with that is we were sitting in the middle of so much horrific killing of Black men and
Right.
Black women. And if you did, well, if you were indeed familiar with Kamala Harris and you know the prosecuting is, she had that tough time as a prosecutor
Yeah.
prosecuting Black men in
Yes.
California. So it was a strange dynamic going on. Absolutely.
Absolutely a strange dynamic
Yeah.
to your point, Angela. And here's a question I have for both of you. President Trump, as recent as last night during his town hall, consistently says he has done more for Black people than President Lincoln. Why can't we stop him from telling that bald-faced lie? Let's start with you, Angela.
Why
As
can't
as a representative with the National Association of Black Journalists, have you guys put out a statement condemning that remark?
As you know, I do not speak on behalf of the organization. That's the president's job.
Right.
But
Has
and
he, as the president?
I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to be rude or ugly, but why haven't we stopped him saying a lot of stuff? Why hasn't someone stopped him from stopping? From just in a lot of ways. I will tell you this. I think part of, as we sit here and as Yamiche runs back and forth with this campaign and this White House, part of the goal is, as she says, we got to figure out, what do I have to fact check on the spot? What do I have to say on the spot? We have to be, as we always are, very well equipped to handle it, to cover the story, very well equipped in our research, always. But you got to have that little extra to the extra now to try to stop that kind of madness, Sister Cheryl. But you are constantly trying to stop some kind of madness, like perhaps we should take Clorox to heal our wounds over COVID. So don't get me started. So you see what I'm saying? So we as press, particularly Black press, Black folks in the press, and anybody who believes in fact and truth, you have to constantly work. And not that you're not always checking anyone's statement, particularly the leaders, but in this case, from day one, we knew, oh my goodness, this is a brand new dictionary I got to check. This is a brand new kind of fact checking I got to deal with. So I think that is part of the issue as well. It's just like what Yamiche said. One of the things every day in the mission of getting up and doing the business of what we do, it's an extra armor.
Yeah.
You know, it's an extra, it's an everything, double, 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 to make sure that you are helping the public and giving information to the public that is the truth and that is arrogant, because to be very serious, he is not going to stop. I cannot bank on him stopping and telling the truth. I can't bank on that. So I have to make sure I do my job double time and share it with the greater good.
Well, Yamiche, you know, Angela is right. He does say a lot of things that are off kilter. But that saying that he's done more for Black folks than Lincoln strikes at the heart of Black life and Black history. And as, like I said, as the great, great, great granddaughter of a Civil War soldier, I didn't even know I was related to him when I was at Syracuse University. I found this out on my own 10 years ago, which speaks to the tragedy of our existence. So why can't anyone take him aside and say, yo, stop saying this bald-faced lie? Yamiche?
I think that the president says things because he thinks that they will help him politically, and that he also says things in jest. And I think that it goes back to the "what the hell do you have to lose" line, where a lot of people saw that and thought, "Oh, why is the president saying this?" I remember being in Wisconsin when he debuted that line. I was in the audience, and an editor asked me, well, how many African-American people are there? And I counted, and it was 2. It was me and someone else. And the line wasn't delivered for us. The line was delivered for suburban white voters. In particular, most people think to get them to feel comfortable with the fact that he was not a racist, that he was not saying things that were racist, and that he was actually reaching out to African-Americans. So I think that's probably part of this, is that he is in some ways thinking that this is a political line that has made it into a stump speech and that is working for him.
Shame, shame. Okay, so let's look ahead, ladies, as we continue our talk with politics. And to our viewers, all 100 and nearly 40 of you, thanks for staying with us. And again, At 11:45, we're going to take your questions. So thank you for those questions submitted so far. We will definitely get to them. Let's look ahead. If Trump wins, what does that mean for Black America? And if Biden wins, Black and Brown America, and if Biden wins, what does that mean for Black and Brown America? Yamiche.
It's tough for me to answer that question because what I can tell you is what the campaigns say that it will mean. Joe Biden says that he is going to usher in criminal justice reform. He's going to usher in a real look at the policing and a real look at police brutality. He's going to try to get to the bottom of why African Americans are some 2.5 to 3 times more likely to be killed by the police. He's going to really take a deep look at systemic racism in this country overall, including, of course, in the middle of a pandemic that is disproportionately killing African Americans. So he has been someone who has really said he's someone who's going to change the way that African Americans are dealt with by the entire system of America. But President Trump, of course, is also selling this idea of economic opportunity. He's saying that there are going to be opportunity zones. There are going to be more jobs. He's making the case that for him, housing is going to be a big thing, that he's going to not only usher in this idea of affordable housing, but that the suburbs are going to be protected. He talks about the fact that African Americans and minorities are some 35 to 30% of suburbs. So his argument to African Americans is that you are going to have a better life. You're going to have more money. You're going to have more prosperity. You're going to also be able to own your own businesses. So his is an economic message to Black people.
Okay. And Angela, what does the future hold for Black and Brown America if either candidate, whichever candidate wins?
I'd just like to say, I echo what Yamiche said, and it's so true. I don't see any great turnaround for Black and Brown community if Trump stays in office. I think we are so knee deep mired in so much that I don't see that. Just because he says that does not make it true, as we know. I think we also need to be very clear and cautious. I heard a lot of this and even covered some stories of this when President Obama was in office. There is no mystical magical wand. Biden and Kamala Harris cannot come in and say, and now everything will be fine for Black and Brown people. That's not going to happen. I think there's so much that has to be done, fixed, overturned, We've got to upright a huge shift in so many different areas, because as Doc King would always tell us, we're intertwined together. And so as we were talking some last night about what we see internally that a lot of us feel has to get fixed, we got to get back to some morals. We got to get back to a little respect and some ethics and truth telling. We do have to heal from a virus there, and then other things can possibly open up. I do not expect Biden-Harris ticket to come in and say, and it's all good. I do expect to hold people at their word. And I think voters need to make sure all leaders are held accountable. And that, as Yamiche spoke, he's saying, we're going to look at the justice system, so on and so forth, economics, healing, environment, and all of that. And that is a good thing. So now, once they get in, now let's start that process. But it is not going to happen overnight. And I don't necessarily think we need to leave everything up to any one ticket. We have to be empowered within self in your own places and spaces in community to move this. And I think that's where it truly starts. And then hold those legislators, commissioners, county folks, sheriffs, police, move on up the ladder. Congress, your senators, we got to do something about that Senate. And in the Moses, we got to do something about the Senate. Is that not right, Yamiche? We've got to do something about the Senate. And so that those of us who feel might be good or different or better can actually enact some legislation and some hope. I don't give up the hope. I don't expect this current administration to really do any 360 and it's going to be okay. I have sense enough to know and live long enough. It takes time to upright a ship. It takes time.
So true. So true. Let's talk about the role of social media, especially Black Twitter, during this election cycle. Yamiche, Black Twitter, it seems, is really controlling a lot of the dialogue as it relates to Black and Brown people. And, this whole thing with Ice Cube kind of said it all. He put out or actually the White House put out that statement saying that Ice Cube is down with them, and Black Twitter exploded to the point where Ice Cube is on defense now. So, Yamiche, talk to us about the role of social media this election cycle as it relates to Black and brown folks.
I think it's Black Twitter has really functioned as a sort of community center for a lot of African Americans who are on social media, who are talking about different things, who are really getting at the heart of some of the things that African American people are really talking about. I think often we go into communities, I know reporters are often guilty of this, the questions we ask are about criminal justice, or it's about, it's the issues that you put in your mind that you think Black people are important, when in fact, Black Twitter is saying, well, actually, our schools are important. Actually, I want to stop not having the virus there. So I really feel, and also, by the way, my cousin just got shot and I have a live video of it. And here's what where the media should be going to tell this story. Yes. So I really think that Black Twitter has served as a sort of community center, or sort of communications department for African Americans. I will say that I think that there are a lot of people who also live in fear of Black Twitter. So I think if you cross at Black folk in particular, if you say something that is seen as racist or seen as problematic, that you will hear about it on Black Twitter. So I think it's a really interesting space. It's a space that obviously I interact with a lot. And I think it's also a space that I feel like I do hesitate to say that it is they're controlling the message for African Americans, because there are so many people who aren't on social media. There are so many people who aren't on Facebook or on Twitter. And I think that, especially for me, I like going out and reporting and interviewing people in their communities, because it reminds me that we don't all live on the internet, and that the internet is it can be a very one-sided look at what's going on. I think about the idea of Black men and Trump. Obviously, there is some weakness there on the Biden campaign in terms of whether or not they can turn out as many Black men as they want to. But when you go into the streets and talk to people, they're like, yeah, well, I'm not really excited about Biden, but obviously I'm gonna vote for him. Who else am I gonna vote for? So I think I've heard that over and over again. And that person might not be represented on Twitter in the same way that you see other things. But I think I enjoy watching Black Twitter. I enjoy all the laughs, because I think for me, because as I started off saying, 2020 has been such a heavy year. So many people are mourning. So many people are sad. Black Twitter is also a place where we can kind of play and it's somewhat of a playground, a digital playground for Black folks to kind of talk about the Erykah Badu versus Jill Scott versus, and to kind of, I think, meet in the woods a bit, and to just talk about the things that are going on in our community, and missing Aretha Franklin, who we knew would not have participated in a versus and probably would have had a versus amongst herself.
Right. Riri does not have to have competition with anyone. Right. She's Riri. I just like to say that for the record. Thank you. She was Riri.
Yes, Angela, the role of social media and Black Twitter, I want you to take a stab at that as well.
Yeah, I think Yamiche pretty much has packaged it well. It is a good community center place, a Black voices place here, but I'm so very cautious. I think this whole social media situation there's a lot of good and there's a lot of challenge. I won't say bad, but there's a lot of challenge, and a lot of people go there and take it as fact. You've got to double check that too. Everybody and everything is on a social media, whether it's Black Twitter, Facebook, or whatever. And a lot is created through that way. I think it can be a strong force. You don't want to cross it. You want to make sure, just double check it. No matter if it's Black Twitter or where you sit in Facebook, people are sharing and all of that. Double check all of that before you join in. You share, you chat. It's just like what we have to do. We check the fact check, and we check it again. I think you have to do that. I think it is an amazing tool to see evolve. I remember when we were learning about this thing called a computer. Oh my goodness, and nobody was gonna get up. What was it, the World Wide Web? How does all this happen? And look at us now on a CBT virtually. Just finished doing a convention that we would normally have on site with 4,000 some odd, 8,000 some odd people with 5 different platforms and social media, this and the other, and it was ridiculous, but it was great. So we do have to check that as well. And then of course, social media media gives you that outlet, like you said, with a Jill Scott or an Erykah Badu, and also the creation of things that you just sometimes stop and say, my word, and you knew it was going to happen. And I'll say it here if nobody else wants to say it, the whole reincarnation of the fly. So, I mean, you know, a lot happens in the social media world. So, yes. Just check and double check, fact check everything.
Yes, fact check it.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
foundation of our business.
Yes.
You know, before we go to the questions, and they're starting to come in, we cannot talk politics in this election cycle without addressing the role of the pandemic. It has fundamentally changed the tenor and tone of this election. Obviously, Black and brown folks are dying from COVID-19. Yamiche, how is this dynamic, this pandemic, affecting the 2020 election from your vantage point?
It's really interesting because I think President Trump has been successful in keeping this really hardline base dedicated to him through the pandemic, through at times downplaying the virus, through at times not wearing a mask. And I think that there are a lot of people who see his handling. I was just interviewing a reporter, a voter who says, I think that he was doing the best that he can. That this was something that was unprecedented. At the same time, you see Joe Biden kind of prosecuting this case that President Trump, not only could he not keep the country safe, he couldn't keep the White House safe, and he couldn't keep himself safe. So I think Joe Biden is really wanting to talk about the pandemic as much as possible, and the Trump campaign is wanting to not talk about it as much as possible, because it is the thing on most voters' minds. It is the thing that is taking over all of the election. Every time we kind of veer off, and you know, we might have a particularly bad police shooting, we might have something happen in the news with wildfires, we might have a really bad hurricane, but by the time the week is over, we're back to the pandemic, because as we know, more than 210,000 Americans have died, more than 8 million people have been infected, and the US is leading in modern industrialized nations when it comes to our death rate. I think we always have to center it in that what's happening in the United States is particularly bad. It's not just bad, and it's not just bad like in other countries. If we were Germany, if we were other countries, we would not see the same death rate. So I think we have to underscore that. I'm interested. The face that I'm really watching, especially in a state like Florida where I am, is seniors.
Right.
Obviously, the virus had a disproportionate impact on Black and brown people, but seniors in particular of all races were really, really hard hit when you think of the death rates. And I'm wondering what impact that might have on them voting and how they see the election. We're seeing some polls that show that Joe Biden's doing better with seniors than he has in the past. And it'll be really interesting to see whether or not he can kind of harness that and harness his messaging on the virus to up his numbers there, because that would really be problematic for President Trump.
Yeah. Quick question, quick follow-up before I let Angela chime in. The president, Yamiche, recently retweeted a derogatory senior cartoon. You know what I know you know what I'm talking about, where he said Joe Biden, rather than president, the P was crossed out, and he made it as nursing home resident and put him in a wheelchair the president retweeted this. Could that affect the senior turnout? I mean, in all likelihood, senior citizens may not see it, but it was picked up by the national press. So how do you think seniors, because you made a good point, Yamiche, about seniors and COVID, and they're usually a very strong turnout. Could that affect how they view the president? He was basically mocking them like he does everyone else.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, one, if seniors will see that, how many of them will see that, and two, whether or not that will be something that people will hold against the president. He said so many things. He's obviously said that Joe Biden has dementia, that he's not all there, that he's not mental, he doesn't have the mental facilities, let alone the mental capabilities to be president. So he's in some ways been mocking Joe Biden in terms of him being frail and kind of making that point. I think Joe Biden has tried to push back on that, but I will say I think it is sticking for some people. I also think Joe Biden, though, having now gone on the campaign trail, I think that's why we're seeing a bit more of Joe Biden. He wants to do away with the idea that he's hiding in his basement, hiding in his home. And you see him now on the campaign trail doing these things because of that. Last night, you saw his town hall. It was something like an hour and a half of him talking. And I think that that is part of the strategy to say, I am very much capable. But the elephant in the room is that we are looking at two of the oldest candidates, if not the oldest candidates for president in the country's history. So I think that both people in some ways have this critique that people can make of them when it comes to their age. But obviously Americans in both parties are comfortable with a 70-something plus man being president because both parties independently chose a 70-something-year-old man to be their candidate.
That's right.
Angela, I want you to chime in on that.
Yeah, she's absolutely correct. I think, as you say, we never know what might stick. He said so much. Trump has said so much inappropriate everything for so long about so much. And as you say, mocking Vice President Biden, Sleepy Joe, I think it was, is part of the term. We don't know how much of that will stick, but we do know that is indeed in the atmosphere. And you're right, Yamiche, as I've tried to watch dueling town halls, and that was very stressful. Joe Biden stayed approximately 30 some odd plus minutes, if not 45 to an hour after the televised portion of it, because some nets kept it up, talking to folks. So he's trying to come out more, making sure with the mask and everything. I do think that campaign now will have to reckon, as they're trying to reckon with. I do believe we have an assistant and someone else in Senator Harris's camp that now has tested positive. And so we know Trump will use whatever he can against, instead of trying to send out comfort, which was the point I think Biden and everyone's been saying in the beginning, with this illness for everyone, and compassion. That's not in his DNA to do that. I don't see it, haven't seen it yet. That would be amazing to see genuinely, sincerely.
Okay, so we have some really great questions coming into our Q&A. Kenya asks, some states offer a service where you can track your ballot. Can we track our mail-in ballot in New York City? Either one of you, if you have knowledge of that. I'm based in New York City, and that's such a good question, and I need to know that. So to my knowledge, I don't know of the tracking in New York City. I don't know. Angela?
I don't know. Yamiche, do you know about in New York? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about New York because I know in Florida you can. In Florida you can track
Virginia you can too, I think.
Counted.
I think, yeah.
So you might want to look. There are a couple good voter guides. Look at NBC's voter guide, and look at the New York Times probably has a good voter guide, and USA Today has a good voter guide. So look at those three. Have any information on that, or if you're really nervous, call your Department of Elections and ask them, hey, I'm worried about my ballot not being counted. How do I make sure? They probably will have an answer for you.
Yeah, well, as a native New Yorker, I'm going to take an educated guess here. New York is such an embarrassment when it comes to voting. We just got early voting. So I'm going to take an educated guess. Kenya, you need to back this up on your own. I'll say they probably do not. They're just barely getting early voting underway. So let's go to Tanya. She asks, what do you think about the double standard that being Black and being a woman poses as we navigate the political civic landscape? And do you think that we identify with being Black first and then a woman, and why? Great question, Tanya. Yamiche.
Whoa.
And ask the question again.
Okay, sure. It's really good. What do you think about the double standard that being Black and being a woman poses as we navigate the political civic landscape? Also, what do you think about the fact that we identify with being Black first and then a woman, and why?
I think that I think it really depends on who you are in terms of how you identify. I think it's a very personal decision. If you're a woman first, if you're Black first, if you're Haitian first, if you see yourself, if your identity is as a teacher, if your identity is, I think that people, the way that they see themselves is a very personal thing. I think in terms of the double standard, I think of course it's very well documented that this country has a double standard and that Black women have had a history of having issues where when Black men got the right to vote, we didn't get the right to vote. When white women got the right to vote, we still didn't have the right to vote. So I think that there are a lot of ways that Black women have had to face our otherness, and that it's hindered. You think about Black mortality rates. You think about, there was a really great story my friend Erica Green did in the New York Times about Black girls and education. It was really groundbreaking. It was about the idea that we spend so much time talking about how little Black boys are disciplined, that we don't realize that little Black girls are disciplined. So are also disciplined at higher rates, and the gap between white little girls and Black little girls is in many places bigger than the gap between Black little boys and white little boys. So I really feel like there needs to be probably a much deeper look at all the different ways that Black women face inequality. I mean, as I get older myself, thinking about children, thinking about how people navigate, there's a layer that when I talk to my friends, Black and white, about working mothers, they see that they're the ones really, even if they have an excited, wanting to be a co-parent husband, they still somehow share more of the burden when it comes to the household and child rearing. Then add Blackness on top of that, and I'm really interested to see how people do it. I don't know how my mama did it, but I'm really interested to see how all of that plays in. But I think it's a good question to ask, and it's probably part of the reason why we see these numbers of Black women being so engaged in democracy, because the systems have to work for them because they're doing so much.
Right.
Yeah. So, and that's a good question for you too, Angela. Are you, especially as the veteran journalist among us, have you identified yourself as Black first or a woman first, Angela? And
I always come in my fullness. I've come in my fullness. I'm a Black woman. It walks through the door that way. There's a lot to this fullness, as Yamiche said, and I love that, our otherness, and I call it our fullness. It's always going to be questioned. There's always going to be pushback. We know that, sisters, in our newsrooms every day, in and out of our newsrooms. We walk in a store and it's all of a sudden, it's going to be a revolution just because we walked in the store. We also know that we hold up half the sky, and we have built and produced and everything else. So I think self-identity is very, very personal, as Yamiche said, especially now as we evolve as humans. And so I self-identify in all of my fullness. It is layered, but every day I wake up like this, to the good Lord says something, every day I know I'm a woman, every day I know I'm Black, and I'm beyond ecstatic and proud of it. I wear it, I push it out, it's clear.
All right.
Veteran, I don't have time anymore. Barely had time then to really say can't be this, that, and the other. I've gone through that in newsrooms. I'm sure, Cheryl, you've experienced. I'm still in a newsroom situation where we were always not enough, too much, maybe too, maybe this, maybe that, never coming allowed to come in our fullness of who we are. I think it is very clear, a very wise woman told me, as we navigate all of this, and we touched on it earlier, because we got to figure this out with the child, with this and that, and the large population of voters, and we're this, that, and the other. It is very clear our shoulders are very, very broad, but does not mean the lift is not heavy.
Wow.
So I have to remember that, as we are all carrying a nation of history and peoples and everything in our fullness.
Beautiful. A lovely question here from Deborah. This panel, she writes, all three, makes me so proud to be a Black woman. How do we, Black women, respond to and enlighten those Black men, and sometimes women, who may not be so polite in their disdain of other Black women in positions of influence/power? Yamiche.
Why do you always start with me with the hard question?
Because she knows, Yamiche, this man was saying, look at you, that's what you need to do.
I'm actually
so start with something politically correct first, because I'm going to read somebody. And we want to make sure we get the fullness.
Read somebody.
Yeah. No, I'm just trying to back and forth. Angela was the last one to speak, but you know what? I'm going to punt that to Angela first. And then I'll get back to you, Yamiche. Okay, so Angela.
Yeah. And we know each other too well up in here. This is too much right now.
Yamiche is like, I got to catch my breath on that one.
Now we want you to be this and this and this too, Yamiche. No.
Now, that's a powerful question because
Yeah.
keeping it 100, when you do, Angela, through your career,
Uh,
and you're a trailblazer, okay? It's a slightly better now. We have lots of African American women like in all kinds of positions of power, but Angela, when you were at your prime, you were the one breaking the holes in the glass ceiling. And I'm sure that you probably have a story of someone that just looked just like you, sadly, who did not embrace you, perhaps. I'm not assuming, but just judging from my personal experience, it's
right.
shocking. It's shocking when a sister is like trying to cut your throat. Let's just keep it real, okay?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so how did you deal with that? And you know, how do we deal with that as Black women?
That is a very serious and very important
Yeah,
question. Absolutely. And we've all experienced it and we will.
yeah,
And on a serious note, I had the most, as everybody had, phenomenal grandmother. And she
yeah.
passed, she transitioned and became an ancestor at 103. And at the
Wow.
moment, even up until the moment of the disassociation in this space to the next space, if you will, she was still getting everybody told. She was still saying, "Oh, make it right, make it straight. You know what you need to do." And so I think it's some of that you carry, you have to hold to get you through. I do a whole lot of praying. If you don't know something bit greater than yourself, I say, hurry up and find it. Hurry up and find it, because that sustains me, just to be very, very clear. And so when you come into those places and spaces, you've got to use all of those tools. The mother that you can't figure out, Yamiche, how did she do it? First of all, ladies, we need to know we are not made of the same stuff they were made of. They
Yeah,
made of some different kind of power. They've
I
transferred that power into us, and then the next generation, they'll be made of some different kind of power. We've got ours. But you
agree.
have to have all of that to sustain you, because nothing breaks my heart more when it
Yeah,
is a Black woman that doesn't get that, darling, just because I might be the first, part of my mission is not to be the last. It is not, we can never, once you get your pumps on and you knock down that door, tear down the building.
Mm-hmm.
You must bring in the righteousness in. So you can have a conversation, you can pray on it, you can pull your tools together, but when the rubber meets the road, as my grandmother used to always say, everybody can't cross over with you. You can't bring everybody along. I cannot let anybody deter the mission that I am on, my God-given mission, my craft, what I know to be right that I have to do. And so you have to deal with that, but you can't let that suppress. And then every night I go home, because I'm still trying to figure out, why are numbers even there for Black and brown people to support Trump? I don't even understand it. Women of all color, I do not understand that. So I got to pray on that. I got to see what I got to do. You have to handle it case by case. Yes, Cheryl, in every newsroom, in every grocery store, in every place you go, someone thinks you should not have what you have earned.
Yeah.
Earned
And
it.
I'm
And,
gonna
and I don't say that being better than or anything. By golly, we worked at it. We come to it sincerely with gusto. And then you also got to have a great kitchen cabinet.
right.
You got to have those other sisters and brothers that understand, that will help to shore you up
Yeah.
and help you move forward. We had some very powerfulness at Syracuse University. And Yamiche, we're so sorry you couldn't join us there. But we have, I know right now, watching right now, there's some sisters who I started out with and finished with in the great year of 78. Whew, didn't mean to date us, sis. But we called ourselves the Shaw Sisters, and we are still together. And you speak their names: the Cindy, the Patsy, the Dawn, the other Dawn, the Pam, the Linnell. They carry me. They were like, "Did you log in yet this morning?" So that's how you kind of deal with that. And then sometimes you just have to read people and move on.
That's true. And I'm gonna
Just read and move on.
chime in here because I have the unique experience when New York One, flagship station in New York City for Spectrum News started.
Right.
I was part of the charter team. I was part of the original staff member, and that meant I was a leader You know, when you help start something, not many people can say they help start a network. You know, they usually go
Right.
into an
Right.
existing network. So, being that I started it, I set out to say, there ain't gonna be none of that black woman hating on
Right.
black woman
Right. Right.
on my watch. And to this day, nearly 30 years later, when African American women walk into, dare I say, my newsroom,
Right.
I
Yes.
embrace them.
Yes.
I let them know listen, we ain't in competition. I'm here to
Exactly.
help you. You do you. I'm going to do me. And you, when the next one comes in, will
Yes.
do the same. And,
Absolutely.
I'm not going to say it's been all roses because I don't know everything that's popped off in 30 years, but
Right.
I can say that generally speaking, it's been a harmonious newsroom for black on black women.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
believe that's because, as someone they look up to now that I'm getting up there in age, I won't have that. And I will stop that dead in its tracks. But let's keep it
That's what you
moving.
have to do. And if I
That's
can,
what
because
you
if I
gotta do.
have sisters reading
Yeah.
you, in case I
Yeah.
forgot Pam and Charmin, I have to get all my sisters in here. So, Lord, thank you, because they will read me. Oh, yeah. Thank God. Yeah.
I
Yamiche,
would
you
just
want to
say
step?
I think for me, I think it's so critical what you two both just said, Cheryl and Angela, which is that you have to make the decision that
Yes.
there's not going to be competition. You have
Oh,
to make a pact almost. Look, we know that they're looking at us and they're like, okay, it's either going to be this black girl or this black girl to be the next anchor or the next this and the next that,
Right.
right? Like
yes.
that's the way that the media has often worked. That's the way the newsrooms have
That's
often worked.
right.
I've made
Right.
a pact with my friends, my sisters, to say, no, we're not going to let them pit us against each other.
No.
We're not going to let anyone say, oh, well, this one's better than that one. It's like we all have our power. We all have our things, and we're all better together if we help each other out. And especially in 2020, I would not have survived 2020 without my girls.
Yeah.
I didn't
Right.
even realize what I had until I was probably getting married and I was picking up my bridesmaids. And I realized for me, it was Georgetown, how much Georgetown gave me in women that I could count on, in women that if something happens, we show up for each other. I show up for my friends, and I tell people, don't
Right.
think I'm busy because you saw me on CNN getting yelled at by the
Right.
president. Call me if you need to call me.
Right.
Text me if you need to text me, because at the end of the day, I'm your girl, and I'm going to show up for you.
Yeah.
And you need to
Right.
know that is critical to my to who I am. And I think now at 33, I am pulling women
Baby.
behind me. And
Yeah.
I'm teaching 18-year-olds, hey, there's a 15-year-old who wants to get into college. You just got into college, which means you could be mentoring someone else. You think that, oh, you're only halfway there because this is your first job. Someone's still trying to get their first job. So you
Yeah.
don't have to wait until you're
Right.
amazing Angela, who obviously
No.
has done so much, or Cheryl, who's been, in New York One for 30 years. You don't have to wait till you've gotten to this amazing place in your career and the
Right.
pinnacle. You could be at the beginning and help people out. And I think that's where I am. I feel like I'm still stumbling and figuring it out and talking too fast sometimes and doing all. And I feel like I'm teaching other people behind me and still getting mentored. But I think that it's so critical to teach every woman and to teach women in particular, all people. But for me, it's really been Black women. I have to say that have really had my back, who have checked on me and who have not been far when I've needed to talk.
Yeah.
Right.
Yamiche, you went to Georgetown, Yamiche?
Georgetown and NYU, yeah.
Let's
Okay.
don't start, Cheryl. Let's don't start with the Georgetown.
You know I'm about to catch you.
To deal with that. That is on.
We still love you,
We
Yamiche.
love madly. So
And
proud of you. Love you madly.
Yeah, and our condolences on the loss of. No, seriously, on John Thompson. John Thompson recently died.
Yes.
And John Thompson and Boeheim, were competitors, but we love you. We love you. Okay, so Yamiche, this question is for you from Candace. Yamiche, how do you manage the balance between fact checking the president and other political leaders who spread misinformation and not spreading the misinformation by fact checking them?
I think it's a really it's a balance you have to strike. You know that when you're fact checking something, you're repeating at times misinformation. So I think that we just have to pick and choose when we do that and how we do that and which facts to check. I think for me, the virus has been one that I really try to hammer home. I try to have my chart ready to say, here's what the United States is doing, here's what the European Union is doing, here's what other countries are doing, so that people understand. I mean, I know I was doing a story just maybe 2 weeks ago, and I hadn't realized that the coronavirus in about 7-8 months has killed more people than the last 5 flu seasons combined.
Yeah.
I think that kind of blew my mind, and I didn't realize, that it's worse than the flu, but you don't realize that it's 5 times worse than the flu. And I think that we have to continue to fact check things. I also think context is really important. It's not just fact checking and say, oh, this is a lie and this is a lie. It's also saying, well, let's just holistically look at what we're talking about right now. Let's holistically say, we can all at least maybe agree on some data, because there are people who say, well, maybe systemic racism isn't that bad, and maybe the system isn't that bad. And then you put up the numbers and it's like, well, let's look at Black mortality. Let's look at school. Let's look at who gets killed by the police. And you say, okay, well, you either have to believe that Black people are fundamentally not healthy people. They can't learn. They have to be shot by the police. They're criminals. Or that there's some imbalance here, and that the biases that we always talk about, that they're at play in a number of sectors in society.
Okay. This question is from Michael Barbosa. He says, quote, I don't see media talk about the inherent systemic racism of the Republican Party in preventing President Obama's federal judgeship nominations of Black and Latino men and women, and the many vacancies left open due to obstruction. Besides Judge Merrick Garland, the Seventh Circuit Court, not considering Myra Selby, first African-American Supreme Court judge in Indiana, and a circuit with a federal appellate judge of color. There are also examples of other potential Black and Latino judges who were not given hearings for confirmation. Angela, I'll let you take that.
Go back to the top part of this question. He's not hearing the media talk about these stories.
Correct. About the Black judgeships.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
All over the country, and the systemic racism and the circumventing of people of color getting on high courts.
Right. I think without question, obviously these stories need to be addressed. I think also I'm very cautious about when people say the media is not talking about this, that, and the other. I need for you to identify. People would come up to me and say, the media, you all are not doing that. I said, no. Who didn't tell that story? I told that story. I saw Cheryl told that story. I know Yamiche wrote that article before she did NPR and did that story. So yes, there are a fazillion and one stories. Unfortunately, the industry, a totally different talk show about the complexity and the stuff that the industry is going through, but we do have to do a better job of telling all of the stories and our stories. That's why we fight so hard to support and uplift and advocate for Black journalists and journalists of color, because no one tells our story better than we can, and the way we do. So we have to constantly do that. And in a fairness, in an other side of it as well, we are bombarded with so much other stuff that we have to clarify, right, wrong, or indifferent. And where we're sitting now in this pandemic, yes, a lot gets lost. A lot is not going to get read. A lot for a lot of folks who go to, as we spoke earlier about the social media-ness, if it's not there, it didn't happen. So there's still much work to do and many, many more stories to tell. I did not know about this judge in Indiana. That was news to me.
Yeah,
maybe that's someone who can hear us or take that mantle up to tell that story. And here's the other thing, because Yamiche brought this up when she's talking on the ground to folks. I go back, in where you sit, you got so much power. Go to the television station, get to know the newspaper reporter, get to know the digital reporter, and tell them this needs to be, walk it through. That information is coming to you. We belong to the public. It's for the public interest. And so that's sometimes how you have to get the work done. You must do the work.
Okay.
People come to me in the grocery store, whoever, and say, I got this story about da-da-da. Bam. Well, I know, taxes are going up, but that's a story too. I've got to make time to tell it.
Okay, so we only have about a few minutes left because we're wrapping at 12:15. So let's try to keep our answers to, I want to try to get as many as possible. So Charles writes, wonderful panel. We're happy to hear that. My question, a prominent Black leader has called a gathering of Black scientists, universities, etc. to vet any COVID-19 vaccine that is presented to our community before we agree to take it. As journalists with your ears to the ground, have you heard of any movement in that regard? And do you have an opinion on the government handling of the virus? Good question.
I think there are a lot of people who are very worried about, one, whether or not they're going to get enough African American people to be part of the testing of this virus, because there are a lot of people who are wary about wanting to even be part of the trials. I also think that there's the part of the big question is going to be, once there is a vaccine, how are you going to convince people to take it? How are you going to convince people that it's safe? Dr. Fauci has a lot of credibility in this country, so I think that he's probably going to be one of the key people trying to explain to people why the coronavirus is safe. Or he might possibly be one of the people who says, look, I can't talk about this. And that will probably mean that a lot of people will not want to take it because they're really scared. We know the history of the country. African Americans have been part of experiments, the Tuskegee, and all sorts of other things that I think makes Americans rightfully, in some regards, very, very worried. I also think that this can, at some point, border on anti-vaxxers. There is also this movement in this country that people have been questioning whether or not vaccines are safe for a long time. So I think if you put those two things together, you could be in a situation where you see the vast majority of Americans not wanting to take a vaccine because they don't trust it, or they don't trust vaccines in general. I think it's an interesting idea about Black doctors vetting it. I hadn't heard of that, so maybe, I don't know if Angela's heard of that, but I had never heard of any movement on that front.
I had not heard that as well. I just heard some conversation primarily with Valerie Montgomery Rice, who's president of Morehouse School of Medicine, talking about getting Black folks in for the testing of it because of history and everything you just said. There is that fear and that challenge. And I think that's going to be a very big challenge. But I had not heard about this specific movement.
Yeah, it's a great point. And lastly, on this subject,
And there you go.
If the government does it, if Trump does it, I will not take it. So I think a lot of people said amen to that. Okay, Lim Nyoy says, I vividly remember an incident when Trump asked April Ryan to set up a meeting for him with the Congressional Black Caucus. This was offensive on many fronts. But how do you handle often being the only Black person in the room while having to maintain your independence and professionalism in the face of blatant racism? What is the energy in the White House press corps off camera? Because what we see on camera is often hostile. And I think that's for you, Yamiche.
Well, I will say I'm usually not the only Black person in the room. There's Darlene Superville of the AP, who's been there much longer than me and has covered more presidents than me. There's Rachel Scott. She's a new White House correspondent for ABC News. At one point, there was Abby Phillips, who is a White House correspondent for CNN, a good friend of mine. Of course, there's April Ryan. So I want to make sure that I'm not at all thinking as if I'm the only African American, because that's rarely true, if at all. I think there are always a little splatterings of us, maybe I would say 2 to 3 Black women in the room usually. But I think I answered this in some ways the way that I would answer it earlier, which is that I do feel like as an African American woman, I've seen and I've honed the skills just through life experiences to really be focused on the work, to really be focused on what is my goal, what is my purpose. And my purpose is to answer tough questions, is to ask tough questions, is to press the administration for answers, and to also to get at the issues that people are worried about in their homes and in their families. At the end of the day, I hope when I'm asking my questions that at least a couple of those questions, you're sitting back thinking, yeah, I really want to know the answer to that question.
Okay. From Ariel, what should new young voters do to prepare for voting? What should we research beforehand? Angela.
What? Say that again. I'm so sorry.
Sure. Ariel asks, what should new young voters do to prepare for voting? And what should they research beforehand?
I think the slogan now is have a plan. Make sure you indeed have a plan. Wherever you are in your space, you need to review all of your local candidates, do your research on them. This thing called the internet pops it right up, and then you can double check the check. Also, if there are any amendments there, you need to do your research and learn up on that. And then see, in many areas, like Cheryl says, she's not sure about New York, but the state of Georgia, early voting overwhelmingly. Get in line, do it, spend the time there. Some still can take your mail-in ballots. I know early voting hasn't started yet in Maryland, Virginia, they've got it. So you've got to do a little bit of research to be prepared. And on the basic level, if you go November 3rd to cast your ballot, you want to make sure you have all of your ID, everything together right now. If something is mailed in, make sure that signature, some basic stuff, reflects the signature on the ID. And when you get there at the polling place, make sure you have all of that in place. And then really in the crust of it all, if you're in an area where you know the line will be wrapped around from here to there, be prepared as a person to stand there and wait and do your God-given duty to vote. Yeah, so he's got a few things to get in place. Basically, do your research, have your day ready, your plan. If you're going in, make sure you're cleared. Folks, or some people I know, even though we're working from home, we have shut down the office so that people can have the time to go and stand and vote.
Okay.
That helps.
Okay, so that was my last question. I just want to say several people chimed in with the question of, can New York City voters track their mail-in ballot? We got several answers to that question. Go SU for getting that answer. Sophia and Michael both said yes, there is a website to track them in New York City. And Sophia posted the website nycabsentee.com. Both Sophia and Michael both gave us the answer. So thank you both for the clarification. I want to say personally, this has been an absolute pleasure. And the conversation was powerful, Angela and Yamiche.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you for
Thank you so much.
time with us to talk about politics with just a few short weeks to go before an election that may change our lives. The next few weeks within our country will surely keep us all on the edge of our seats. Thank you for your knowledge, expertise, and candid dialogue where you were able to share what we're living through. Now, just a quick note about the Our Time Has Come program and the impact it has upon our students. It's enormous, ladies and gentlemen. And without your generous support, our OTHC Black and Latino students from today and in the future will be supported on their educational journey. Please, please, please make a donation. Consider making a donation to the scholarship. And now I'm Cheryl Wills from Spectrum News New York 1, class of 1989, Newhouse. I would like to introduce two of the brilliant members from the Syracuse Office of Multicultural Advancement. And I also want to personally thank them for inviting me to be part of this. This was an honor. And I want to also thank Rachel Vassell for her leadership and all of the leadership in the Multicultural Advancement program. And now here they are to deliver an impact report on Our Time Has Come scholarship. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you. Bye-bye.